Didn't get a ticket on the way back, but I made it certainly in good time. Amen. In prayer for your First Lady, she went to visit family in Texas, and she hit the highway headed back. So I simply ask for your prayers as she's making her way back to Tulsa. Amen. We are continuing in our series from 1 Peter, right? Entitled Programmed for Victory. We talked about, I just want to reiterate, the overall purpose of the series, which comes directly from the purpose of the book of 1 Peter, really is to help us as believers to understand how God in his sovereignty both ordains our trials and troubles, but then also in his sovereignty how he uses our trials and troubles to grow us to spiritual maturity. Amen? That's literally what Romans 8:28 means when it says that God works all things together for our good, right? He works them together for our good in order that he might grow us into Christ's likeness. So today, and again, I'm going to be all over 1 Peter in this series. So today, we're going to take a verse from the first chapter and then a verse from the fourth chapter. First of all, I want us to go to 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 6, and then we're going to go to the fourth chapter in the 12th verse. I'm reading for those who want to follow along, not just in your Bible, but maybe on your phone. I'm reading from the New American Standard Version of the Bible. 1 Peter 1, verse 6 says, "In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials." If you go to the fourth chapter, 12th verse, Peter says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange thing were happening to you." I want to talk today about God's midnight ministry. I want to talk about God's midnight ministry. C.S. Lewis referred to pain and suffering as God's megaphone to arouse an apathetic Christian. He said that pain and suffering, it literally is God's megaphone, God's way of getting our attention when we're not paying attention to him. And many of us can identify with the fact that oftentimes when life is going good, we may not pay as much attention to God as we need to. And so sometimes God has to use pain and suffering in order to awake children of God from our spiritual apathy. As a matter of fact, when all of our needs are met, we might say our prayers, but we don't pray our prayers. And so in order to get us from simply saying cute prayers and actually talking to God in prayer, God has to ordain some pain and suffering in our life in order that he might arouse our attention. Paul Brand and Philip Yancey, authors, called pain and suffering the gift that nobody wants. I believe we can all identify with that. We all can say we've had some pain and suffering. May have some pain and suffering right now, but Philip Yancey and Mr. Brand say that pain and suffering are the gift that nobody wants. M. Scott Peck, in reference to pain and suffering, called it the road less traveled. Because there are a whole lot of believers that don't really want to travel that road. But the Lord said that if you suffer with me, you'll reign with me. The fact of the matter is we have a strange theology out there now that says that we can have glory without the cross. But you won't find anywhere in the Bible where there's glory or being blessed without going through the cross. Dietrich Bonhoeffer called it cheap grace. Folk who want the hand of God but don't want to worship the heart of God. And the fact of the matter is the reason why the believers in 1 Peter are going through trials and trouble because God wants them and us to understand if there is no cross, there will be no glory. And somebody need to understand, listen, understand that God in the midnight experiences of your life preparing you for what you've been asking for. We all like the scripture. He'll do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or think. And we're waiting for God to do it while we're crying about being in the midnight. The fact of the matter is, my friends, we need to understand that God uses pain and suffering in order to grow us to spiritual maturity. Last but not least, A.W. Tulsa says this about God's night ministry. He says, slowly you will discover God's love in your suffering. Your heart will begin to approve the whole thing. You will learn what all the schools in the world could not teach you, the healing action of faith. You will feel and understand the ministry of the night, and you will find that pain can do more for you than joy. Amen. None of us would ever grow if all we had was joy. And so, listen, I'm not trying to say pain feels good. But God cannot grow us without some suffering and some pain. Listen, good theology, and this is what Peter is doing in chapter 1, leading up to verse 6 and through chapter 1. Peter is wanting the believers to understand good theology, or good or right thoughts about God, are essential if we are going to suffer well. You're right. Now, there's some bad theology out there that says that a child of God will not suffer. And we know that's bad theology by experience. Because no matter how much we name and claim and try to have this super hyper faith, the fact is we go through some suffering. But Peter wants us to understand that good theology that is focused on the grace and the salvation of God will allow us to suffer well. Right? And so it helps us to persevere when trials come and also give us hope. It enables us to actually believe Psalm 30 and verse 5, which says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Now, we got to look at that verse. The fact of the matter is, experientially or in your existential existence, you will experience some weeping. But if you don't have hope that is based on good theology, you will never transition in your nighttime from weeping to joy. Matter of fact, here's what hope is. Hope is not necessarily when the sun comes up after weeping. The fact of the matter is, God can give you sunlit joy even in the midnight hour. Listen, it says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. You need to understand, God can bring morning even in the night. Y'all not afraid. God can give you hope even in the midst of your midnight. Somebody ought to start praising God in the darkness. Sometimes you got to worship God in the dark periods of your life. Worship God in the dark periods of your life. Listen, the series talks about how God uses our trials and tribulations to grow us to spiritual maturity. How do you know you're spiritually mature? You know you're spiritually mature when you don't have to wait for the morning to worship God. You have to be able to worship God even when it's still dark. You got to trust God when it's dark. Because the fact of the matter is, He's the only one that knows how to turn the light on. And He ain't going to turn the light on until somebody cries out to Him. Solomon said, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways, even when you can't see your way through, acknowledge Him and He will direct your path. God is looking for somebody who's walking by faith and not by sight. Somebody that will trust God when you can't trace God. So I want us to understand, good theology is essential. It is faith, my brothers and sisters, in the good and the sovereignty of God that enables us to wait until the morning comes. No amount of good theology is able to take the pain out of suffering. But God's sovereignty also does not take away the pain. He just takes the pain and works it for our good. So what we need to understand or glean from these two texts as we look at God's midnight ministry First of all, it was in the life of Peter. Now it's in the life of these scattered and dispersed disciples. First thing we notice about God's midnight ministry is that God wants us to deal, number one, with the reality of pain. Amen. He wants us to deal with the reality of pain. Westernized Christianity has been so influenced by American culture and capitalism. We think we can come up with a quick fix to everything. So listen. So then we find that even in the church, because even though Paul says in Romans 12 and 2 that we're not to be conformed to the world, unfortunately the church has become too conformed to the world. So we think there ought to be a quick fix to our suffering. Somebody talk to me. If it don't feel good, I just try something different. I just leave. I just break up. I just walk out. I need a quick fix. That's Americanized Christianity. And we don't want to deal with the reality of our pain. Listen, from a ministry perspective, there's a two-fold aspect to dealing with the reality of our pain. The first aspect is this. Maybe you are not suffering right now. But dealing with the reality of pain when you're not suffering allows you to empathize with somebody who is suffering. But what we find in the church, we no longer have this ministry of weeping with those who weep and rejoicing with those who rejoice, because we have no empathy anymore. The reason why we have no empathy is because suffering don't matter unless I'm the one suffering. We don't want to hear sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so talking about their trial and trouble, because your suffering don't mean nothing to me. But that's not New Testament Christianity. New Testament Christianity says when you down, I'm going to get down with you. When you rejoice, I'm going to get up with you. But we have become so self-centered in our theology and our Christianity that when we come in to worship God, it's about me, myself, and I. I'm going to get mine. I really don't care if you get yours or not. That's not New Testament worship. That's not New Testament theology. So understand, to deal with the reality of pain, first of all, if you're not suffering, you need to be able to deal with the reality of somebody else's suffering. But then, on the other hand, if you are somebody who is suffering, listen, you need to understand, if you're in the midst of suffering, see that God has not abandoned you in the pit or the furnace. And what hope and good theology will do, just like those here, it will help us to understand that in the midst of your suffering, God may seem silent, but He has not abandoned you in the pit. He has not abandoned you in the furnace. Beyond the reality of pain, we also got to deal, my brothers and sisters, with the problem of pain. We don't like to confront our pain. As a matter of fact, believers are better than anybody else in the world in masking our pain, masking our hidden hurts. As a matter of fact, you'll find most church fights, arguments, and problems are centered around somebody who has not dealt with some element of pain in their life. And when we don't deal with the pain in our life, guess what we do? We act it out on other people. Somebody talk to me in this place. Listen, if I'm not feeling good, I want everybody else to feel as bad as I do. If I'm having a bad day, I want everybody else to have a bad day. Listen, I'm not talking about in the world, I'm talking about in church. If I'm angry, I want everybody else to be angry. I don't like it when I'm upset and folks over there shouting and hollering and talking about how good God is. We got to deal with the problem of pain. Even in God's house. Because avoiding pain results from not knowing how to deal with pain. Then we've also got to deal, my brothers and sisters, with the depth of pain. When we talk about the depth of pain, we need to understand there is a depth to all of our pain that medicine cannot reach. There is a depth to all of our pain that psychologists cannot reach. There is a depth to all of our pain that even that person you love the most cannot reach, let alone heal. There is a depth of pain that only the Lord can reach. Now, how do I know the Lord can reach it? It says in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, then in verse 16. Verse 15 says that He in His flesh was in all points tempted just as we are, but without sin. What does that mean? It means he experienced grief or the pain of losing someone he cared about. When Lazarus died. What does it mean? It means that he actually hungered in his human body. And knows what it's like for a child to not have food and starve. It says that foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He knows what it's like to sleep under a bridge in downtown Tulsa, because he didn't have no home. He was at all points affected with pain and suffering, just like you and I are. But there was a greater level of suffering and pain that he experienced. And we ought to be glad he experienced that for us. And that pain and suffering was on the cross. Listen, one of my favorite stories is a story of a group of missionaries, husband and wife, that had dedicated years of their life, decades of their life, serving in foreign lands. And as they were serving, they were witnessing, they were saving souls, but they went through a great deal of hardship, persecution, because they dare speak up in the name of the Lord. Many times they almost lost their life. They had to go without physical comforts. They had to sleep in places that were uncomfortable. They had to be exposed to disease. They went through this stuff year after year. But finally, they were allowed to return home to the continental United States. They boarded the plane. When they got on the plane, they noticed there was a diplomat in first class. That diplomat was getting first class treatment. Everybody on the plane was catering to the diplomat. But these missionaries that had devoted their life, that had gone through pain and suffering, nobody was catering to their needs. When the plane landed, the diplomat got off first. There were bands that were playing. It was literally limousines and a ticker tape parade. When the diplomat got off, there was a whole lot of pomp and circumstance. Everybody was celebrating the diplomat. But guess what? When the missionaries got off the plane, everybody was gone. There wasn't no pomp and circumstance. There wasn't no band playing. And when they got off the plane, they felt like everything they had done, all of the persecution, all the troubles, was not worth it. The husband was dejected. His wife put his arm around him and said, "Honey, you don't understand. We're not home yet." So, somebody didn't understand. We just built, passing through this barren land. But some glad morning, when we get home, there's going to be a bright cloud waiting to leave you. He said, if you suffer with me, you'll reign with me. I'll take the suffering so I can get my crown. I'll take the suffering so I can bask in his presence. I'll take the suffering because one day there won't be no weeping, no more wailing, no more crying, no more sorrow for the former thing that showed up, passed away. I thank my God that he suffered. He died. Didn't he die? On the cross for my sin, for my pain, for my suffering. He got up. Somebody say he got up. He got up. All the power of heaven and earth in his hands. He's reached in the invitation. Christian discipleship. We want someone to know that today is the day of salvation. Harden not your hearts. Understand that the Lord came and died in order that you might have a right to the tree of life. And so if you're here today and have not given your heart to Christ, by confessing with your mouth and simply stating that you believe that God raised Jesus from the dead, listen, you need to be saved while the blood is yet running warm in your veins. As we stand, we pray earnestly for a response to the gospel message. Someone to come and give us the hand and give God the heart.